My name is Alyssa Dunn. I'm 26. And for the past 3 years, I've been the one caring for my sister's 4 children as though they were mine. When my bakery went under, taking all my savings with it, I packed up and moved into her place, hoping to rebuild. Instead of starting fresh, I found myself trapped in an endless cycle of babysitting, cooking meals, running errands, managing school schedules, while she worked nights and was barely present. To make ends meet, I picked up a few shifts at a coffee shop and took night classes in graphic design, still chasing a future that kept slipping farther away. Then, one evening, she dropped a bomb. She was expecting again, baby number 5. My stomach knotted. I'd sacrificed everything, my money, my goals, my independence, and now there was another child on the way. I'd reached my breaking point. I couldn't keep doing this. My voice shook when I finally exploded and stormed off to my room. Her expression turned cold, like I'd betrayed her. In that moment, I made up my mind to leave and finally live for myself. But she didn't back down. Her anger was volcanic, and what followed tore our family apart. If you've ever felt crushed under someone else's responsibilities, tell me your story in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell. You'll want to see how this chaos unfolds. You won't believe what came next. Each day with my sister's kids felt like a war that never ended. My alarm screamed at 5:30, and I dragged myself up to start the morning routine. Logan, 15, was already bickering with 12-year-old Ellie over the last Pop-Tart. "You took mine yesterday!" Ellie yelled, slamming a cabinet. I stepped in, tearing the pastry in two, while 9-year-old Hunter sent orange juice splashing across the counter. Little Nora, wrapped around my leg, begging for braids before school. I gulped down cold coffee, herded everyone into the car, and braced for the daily circus. Logan blasting music, Ellie groaning about math, Hunter firing off dinosaur trivia, and Nora singing loudly off-key. By the time I pulled up to the school, my head was throbbing. I raced to the cafe for my 6-hour shift, steaming milk and forcing polite smiles at impatient customers. "Can you hurry up?" snapped a man in a suit as I juggled 3 drink orders. $15 an hour barely covered gas and my phone bill. After clocking out, I picked the kids up, oversaw homework, threw together spaghetti, and broke up another shouting match. This one over who had to feed the dog. My sister Cheryl worked overnight at the supermarket with her boyfriend Blake, which meant she was either asleep or gone. Most days I only saw Cheryl for a few minutes, just long enough for her to mumble a half-awake, "Thanks for keeping things together," before collapsing on the couch. My nights were the only time that felt remotely mine. After tucking Nora into bed and checking Ellie's algebra homework, I'd open my laptop for online graphic design lessons. Design had always been my passion. Logos, layouts, the dream of one day running my own studio. But sitting in front of Photoshop tutorials at midnight felt like chasing something that kept fading away. My eyes stung from exhaustion, and more than once I woke to a dead laptop battery and an unfinished assignment. One night, Ellie padded into my room and whispered, "Why do you look so tired?" "Just trying to keep up," I said, pretending a smile. She hugged me, and for a heartbeat I felt wanted, until the thought struck. Wanted for what? More diapers, more car rides, more tears to wipe away? This wasn't the life I was supposed to be living. I started noticing how much weight I carried for everyone else. Logan needed lifts to soccer practice. Ellie's dance recitals couldn't happen without me. Hunter's science fair loomed, and Nora's asthma meant another run to the pharmacy. I was draining the last of my bakery savings, about $3,000, on their doctor visits and school supplies. Cheryl contributed occasionally, but most of her paycheck went toward rent and groceries. Blake, who worked nights alongside her, never once offered help. "You're amazing with them," Cheryl would say, as if it were praise, but it wasn't. It was a leash. I was living her life, not mine. One evening, while the kids watched TV, I paced the kitchen on the phone with my best friend, Tara. "I'm drowning," I confessed. Tara, who freelanced as a designer herself, didn't soften the truth. "Alyssa, you're not their mom. Stop putting your life on pause for someone else's." Her words hit me hard. My laptop sat open nearby, a half-finished logo glowing on the screen. I hadn't turned in a project in weeks. Professors had started emailing about overdue work. It wasn't the kids' fault. I loved their messy, noisy energy. Logan's sarcastic humor, Ellie's quiet smiles, Hunter's endless curiosity, Nora's clingy, giggly hugs. They were family to me, but they weren't mine to raise. Cheryl was supposed to be their mother, yet she was rarely around, and Blake behaved like the house ran itself, while I picked up every piece. I'd hear him joke to Cheryl about teamwork, though their idea of teamwork was me doing it all. I counted the hours one night, 10 spent caring for the kids, 6 at the cafe, 3 studying. That left maybe 5 for sleep. My dream of becoming a full-time designer, of building something with my own name on it, was slipping through my fingers. One evening, after Nora cried herself to sleep over a missing stuffed bunny, I sat staring at my sketchbook. Lately, I'd only drawn silly stick figures to make her smile. The bold designs I once loved were gone. I closed the notebook, my chest tight. It wasn't just fatigue anymore. I was fading. Every day spent raising Cheryl's children pulled me farther from the person I was meant to be. I cared about those kids deeply, but I couldn't keep giving up pieces of myself to hold everything together. Something had to shift, and soon. About a week later, I was folding laundry when Cheryl came bursting in, her face glowing with excitement I hadn't seen in ages. Behind her strolled Blake, carrying a pizza box and wearing that smug grin I'd come to hate. "We've got news," Cheryl announced, grabbing my hand and tugging me toward the couch. "I'm pregnant, baby number 5, she said, beaming. Blake tossed the pizza onto the table like we were throwing a party. My stomach tightened, but I managed a stiff smile. "Wow, congrats," I muttered, forcing the words out while my mind spun. Another baby, another responsibility that wasn't mine. I could barely keep up as it was, and they expected me to celebrate. That night, while we were eating, Cheryl dropped the real bombshell. "We've been talking," she said, exchanging a look with Blake, who leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "You're amazing with the kids, Alyssa. We were thinking maybe it's time you help out a little more." Blake jumped in. "Yeah, maybe quit that coffee shop job and focus on them full time." I froze, fork suspended midair. "Quit my job?" I repeated, my voice barely steady. He shrugged like it was obvious. "We're both slammed at work, and with the baby on the way, we just can't juggle it all." Cheryl nodded quickly. "Plus, money's tight. You could pitch in, say, $300 a month for rent. It's only fair, since you live here." My pulse hammered in my ears. $300? I could barely afford gas. I tried to keep calm. "I already do everything. The school runs, meals, homework. I can't quit my job," I said quietly. Cheryl's expression hardened. "You're living here rent-free, eating our food, using our space," Blake added smoothly. "It's just for a while. We'll figure it out once the baby comes." "Temporary," he said. The word made my blood burn. I'd been their safety net for 3 years, and now they wanted more. I shoved my plate aside and stood up. "I need to think," I said before walking off, afraid I'd explode if I stayed another second. The next morning, once the kids were at school, I called Tara. "They want me to quit my job and start paying rent," I told her, my hands trembling. "They're treating me like I'm hired help." Tara didn't even pause. "Alyssa, they're exploiting you. You're not their nanny. What about your classes? Your future?" Her words hit me right where it hurt because she was right. I'd been so busy holding Cheryl's family together that I'd let my own life fall apart. I stared at my laptop afterward, that same half-finished logo still sitting on the screen, and realized I hadn't made any progress in weeks. All my energy was going to raising kids that weren't even mine. Over the next several days, Cheryl and Blake turned up the pressure. "Think about the kids," Cheryl said one morning, thrusting a handwritten list into my hands. More errands, doctor visits for Nora's asthma, grocery runs, and soccer fees for Logan. Blake chimed in later, casually suggesting I sell what was left of my old bakery equipment to help the family. I wanted to scream. This wasn't a request for help. It was a demand for complete surrender. It became impossible not to see how they avoided accountability. Cheryl would sleep through the kids' shouting matches, leaving me to break them up. Blake would stroll in after work, crack jokes with Cheryl, and relax while I stood at the stove making dinner. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a convenience. One night, while I was packing up my laptop after another late design session, Logan lingered in the doorway. "You okay?" he asked, his usual teasing gone. I hesitated, then managed, "I'm trying to be." He nodded quietly. a flicker of understanding in his eyes. The kids noticed more than I gave them credit for. They knew who was holding things together, but Cheryl and Blake acted like it was my obligation. That night, lying in bed, my mind wouldn't stop racing. My savings were almost gone, my grades were tanking, and the dream I'd fought for was fading fast. I needed to break free, not just to save myself, but to show the kids what self-respect looked like. I began scrolling through rental listings, hands shaking as I typed. If I had to spend $300 a month, I'd rather put it toward my own place. I wasn't their housekeeper. I was done being treated like one. The next evening, I sat with Ellie helping her review history notes when Cheryl stormed into the kitchen, arms folded tight. "We need to talk," she barked, her voice slicing through the quiet. I closed the textbook and looked up. "What's going on?" I asked evenly. She didn't bother easing into it. "You're not pulling your weight, Alyssa. I asked you to help more, but you're still wasting time at that coffee shop. It's irresponsible." The word hit like a slap. Irresponsible? I'd been the one keeping her household running for years. "I'm doing everything I can," I shot back, my tone sharper than I intended. "I cook, I clean, I drive the kids everywhere." Cheryl rolled her eyes. "That's not enough. With the baby coming, we need you here, not off chasing some hobby degree." My chair screeched against the tile as I stood. "Those classes aren't a hobby," I said, my voice trembling. "They're my future." She laughed then, cold, bitter, and cruel. "Future? You're living under my roof, eating my food. You think you're too good for us now?" Cheryl snapped, and the words struck harder than I expected. I wanted to lash back, but Ellie stood in the doorway, wide-eyed, clutching her homework. I forced myself to breathe. "I'm not your servant, Cheryl. I've given you 3 years of my life." She stepped closer, her tone dropping into something sharp and cold. "If you're not completely committed, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." For a second I couldn't move. Was she actually throwing me out? Before I could speak, she spun on her heel and walked away, leaving me trembling with fury. I slipped outside, phone in hand, pacing the backyard. "She called me irresponsible," I told Tara, my voice tight. "Like I owe her everything." Tara's tone was steady, but firm. "Alyssa, you have to draw a line. You're not her maid or her second mother. You're allowed to want your own life." "I know," I murmured. "But the kids, they need me. They need their mom," she interrupted gently. "Not you burning yourself out to fix her mess. You've got some savings. Use it. Get your own place." Her words ignited something in me, a flicker of determination I hadn't felt in months. That night, I opened my laptop and started browsing apartment listings in Madison. A few small studios popped up downtown, around $1,500 a month. My leftover bakery savings, $3,000, would cover a deposit and the first month's rent. If I kept the coffee shop job and picked up extra shifts, I could just make it. My heart raced as I ran the numbers, fear and hope colliding in my chest. For the first time in years, escape felt possible. Still, every time I pictured leaving, the kids' faces flooded my mind. Logan's quiet worry, Ellie's soft hugs, Hunter's constant chatter, Nora's little hands clutching mine. Walking away would break my heart, but staying would break me. The next afternoon, after picking Logan up from school, I sat him down. "I'm thinking about moving out," I said carefully. He frowned, tugging at the sleeve of his hoodie. "Because of Mom?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, but I'll still be around, okay? Just not living here. I need to get my life together too." He didn't say much, just gave a small nod, but I could tell he understood more than his age should allow. That night, I drafted a rough budget. $1,500 for rent, $500 for food and utilities, $200 for classes. My coffee shop pay, $15 an hour, 30 hours weekly, would barely stretch far enough if I cut every luxury. No takeout, no new clothes, nothing extra. Over the next few days, Cheryl started noticing my distance. One morning, she caught me scrolling rental ads on my phone. "You're acting weird," she said, suspicion creeping into her voice. Without looking up, I replied flatly, "Just planning." She gave a sharp laugh. "Planning to bail on us. Typical." The words stung, but I refused to rise to it. I'd wasted too much energy fighting battles that never changed anything. Later, Tara texted to check in. "You're doing the right thing. Don't let her guilt you into staying." I reread those lines over and over, clinging to them like a lifeline. I wasn't just leaving a house. I was reclaiming my freedom. By the week's end, I had a list of apartments lined up, and a quiet determination that no argument from Cheryl could shake. A few mornings later, after dropping the kids off at school, I drove to see the first place, a tiny Madison studio tucked above a corner bakery. The space was modest, one open room and a kitchenette, but it felt like possibility, a place that could finally be mine. The landlord quoted $1,500 a month plus a security deposit. I nodded, phone in hand with screenshots of 3 other listings. My $3,000 in savings would just cover the initial costs, but I'd have to make every dollar count. Back home, I kept my plans under wraps, dodging Cheryl's suspicious glances. I wasn't ready for another explosion. Not yet. Instead, I started quietly preparing the kids, beginning with Logan. After dinner one evening, while Ellie helped Hunter with a puzzle, I pulled Logan aside and handed him a small notebook. "We need to talk," I said gently. "If I move out, I'm going to need you to step up." His eyes flared. "You're leaving because of Mom, aren't you?" he snapped, tossing the notebook onto the table. I steadied my voice. "I'm not leaving you, Logan. I'm just trying to teach you how to handle things when I'm not here." We sat together as I showed him how to plan simple dinners, tacos, pasta, sandwiches, how to make a grocery list, and how to double-check Nora's inhaler before school. He sighed, but took notes anyway. "You're 15, I told him softly. "You're capable of more than you think." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Ellie overheard our conversation and found me later, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you moving out because we're too much?" she asked, twisting a strand of hair around her fingers. My chest ached. "No, sweetie, it's not about you. I just need my own space for a while." She wrapped her arms around me, face buried against my shoulder, and I felt her trembling. I held her close, whispering that I wasn't disappearing, just changing where I lived. Explaining it to Hunter and Nora was harder. At 9 and 6, they couldn't quite understand. Over breakfast, I told them gently that I might have a new home soon. Hunter frowned at his cereal. "Who's gonna help with my science project?" he asked. Nora's eyes filled with tears. "Will you still braid my hair?" I assured them I'd visit often, that nothing would change how much I loved them, but their confusion lingered, heavy in the air. Over the next few days, I toured more apartments. Small, bare spaces with peeling paint and thin walls, but each one felt like a step closer to freedom. One apartment overlooked a quiet park. Another sat just a few blocks from the coffee shop. I ran numbers in my head until I settled on the only studio that truly fit my budget. My paycheck from the cafe, about $1,800 a month, would barely stretch to cover rent, utilities, and food, but it was enough if I skipped anything extra. I decided to pause my design classes for a month to rebuild my savings, promising myself I'd re-enroll once I got settled. When Tara called, her voice was full of excitement. "You're finally taking control," she said. "The kids will be fine. You're teaching them what strength looks like." Her words lifted me, but the kids' faces kept tugging at my heart. One evening, I showed Logan how to use the washing machine, guiding his hands as I explained how much detergent to pour. "Mom never does this," he muttered, eyes focused on the spinning drum. I only nodded, choosing silence over bitterness. He was starting to see the truth on his own, and it hurt him more than he'd admit. Ellie stayed close, helping Nora with bedtime stories, but blinking back tears. Hunter asked when I'd visit, and little Nora clung to me every chance she got, whispering, "Don't go far." I felt like I was being split in two, but backing out wasn't an option anymore. By the end of the week, I'd scheduled a lease signing. I packed quietly, just a few clothes, my laptop, and a sketchbook, hiding them in my closet. Cheryl didn't notice. She was either with Blake or sleeping off her shifts. When I told the kids I'd be moving soon, I promised daily calls and weekend visits. Logan's resentment softened into a stiff nod. Ellie handed me a crayon drawing of us together, her silent goodbye. Hunter and Nora still looked lost, but I hoped someday they'd understand this wasn't abandonment. It was proof that you're allowed to choose yourself. As the plan came together, a fragile sense of hope began to grow. I was finally ready to start over, even if that meant facing the world alone. The next week, I carried the last box into my new Madison studio. It wasn't much, just a mattress, a thrifted desk, and the quiet hum of my laptop, but it felt like freedom. I arranged my sketches on the table, breathing in the stillness. For the first time in years, the space felt truly mine. I texted Logan, Hunter, and Nora, "Pizza night soon, I promise." Cheryl hadn't said a single word since I signed the lease. Her silence felt more like peace than punishment, but that calm didn't last. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "This is Officer Doyle with the Madison Police Department," a steady male voice said. My stomach twisted. "We've received a complaint. Could you meet us at your sister's address?" My heart pounded as I drove back, thoughts racing the whole way. When I pulled up, 2 officers were waiting outside, Doyle with a clipboard, Reed scanning the yard. And there on the porch stood Cheryl, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Cheryl's face was crimson with fury. "She stole $500 and wrecked our furniture," she screamed, jabbing her finger toward me like I was a criminal. "The washer's broken and the sofa's ripped to shreds." I stared at her, stunned. "I didn't take anything," I said, my voice steady. "I left the house spotless." Officer Doyle lifted an eyebrow. "Let's take a look," he said calmly. Cheryl led us inside, pointing dramatically at a couch with a torn cushion and a washing machine that wouldn't turn on. "She did this before she moved out," Cheryl insisted. I shook my head. "That's not true. I haven't been here since the day I left." Officer Reed crouched to inspect the sofa, running his hand over the fabric. "These stains look old," he noted. Then he checked the washing machine, tugging at a loose wire behind it. "Could just be wear and tear." I looked Cheryl straight in the eye. "You know I didn't steal anything. You can search my car, my apartment, whatever you want." Officer Doyle turned to Cheryl. "You're accusing her of theft and vandalism. Do you have any evidence?" Cheryl hesitated, eyes darting. "The money was in my dresser," she mumbled. She knew where it was. Before I could answer, Logan appeared in the doorway, his face pale but determined. "I need to say something," he told the officers. My heart clenched. "Logan, what are you doing?" I whispered. He squared his shoulders and looked at Officer Doyle. "She's lying. That couch has been ripped for months. Hunter spilled juice on it last summer, and the washing machine broke weeks ago because Mom overloaded it. As for the money, she used it on groceries and didn't tell anyone." Cheryl's eyes widened. "Logan, stop!" she snapped, but her voice trembled. He didn't flinch. "Alyssa's done more for us than she ever did. She paid for our school supplies, took us everywhere, while Mom and Blake were never around." My throat tightened as I watched him defend me, his voice steady, his eyes burning with quiet anger. Officer Reed scribbled something in his notebook. "So there's no proof of theft or new damage?" he asked. "None," Logan said firmly, folding his arms. "Mom's just upset Alyssa left." Cheryl's face darkened, but she stayed silent. Officer Doyle exhaled slowly. "Ma'am," he said, "filing a false report is a serious matter. We'll overlook this one, but don't contact us again unless there's an actual crime." The room went silent, except for Cheryl's uneven breathing. I looked at Logan, pride and heartbreak twisting together in my chest. For the first time, someone had stood up for me, and it was one of the kids I'd sacrificed everything for. The officers gave me a nod before heading back to their car, leaving the air heavy and still. I turned to Logan in the driveway. "You didn't have to do that," I said quietly. He kicked at a pebble, his shoulders hunched. "You don't deserve this, Alyssa," he muttered. "You've always been the one who's there for us." I pulled him into a hug, blinking back tears. "Thank you," I whispered. Back at my studio, I called Tara, my voice shaking. "She tried to accuse me of stealing and destroying her stuff," I said, pacing the tiny room. "Logan told the truth, but I can't keep playing her games." "She's panicking," Tara replied sharply. "You took away her control. Keep your boundaries strong and don't go back." I nodded, looking around my bare apartment. Small, quiet, mine. No shouting, no guilt, no chaos. Just space to breathe. That night, I texted Ellie to check in. She sent me a photo of her newest drawing, the 4 of them smiling under a sun that said family. Hunter asked when I'd visit. Nora wanted a bedtime story over the phone. I promised soon, even as I felt the ground shift. Cheryl's false accusations had burned a bridge, and Logan's words kept replaying in my mind. She and Blake were barely there. He'd said it out loud, the truth I'd carried alone for years. The kids deserved better, and maybe this was my chance to give it to them in a different way. I sat at my desk, sketchbook open, and started on a new logo design. My hand moved steadily for the first time in months. Cheryl could throw every lie in the world my way, but I was finally creating something that was mine, untouchable, unbreakable. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. It was Logan, his voice trembling. "Mom's in the hospital. Something's wrong with the pregnancy. The kids are scared." My heart stopped. Whatever anger I'd held toward Cheryl vanished in an instant. I thought of Ellie's tearful hugs, Hunter's constant questions, Nora's tiny braids. None of them deserved this chaos. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the hospital, my mind racing. In the waiting room, a woman in scrubs approached. "I'm Dr. Patel," she said gently. "Your sister has placenta previa. She'll need strict bed rest, likely for the remainder of her pregnancy." 3 months? I asked, voice tight. She nodded. "At least." I found Cheryl in her hospital room, pale and drained, a shell of her usual fire. "The kids need you," she murmured, not quite meeting my eyes. I stood there, torn between fury and duty. Logan's voice echoed in my head. "You've always been there for us." "I'll help," I said finally, my voice calm and sure. "But only for the kids, and on my terms." Cheryl's brow furrowed, but she was too weak to fight. "I keep my job," I continued. "I keep my apartment, and I'm not paying a cent toward your bills. I'll stay for 3 months until you're back on your feet. No more, no less." She gave a small nod, silent and pale. I turned away, my chest tight but steady. I wasn't coming back for her. I was coming back for the kids, and this time I was the one setting the rules. I was there for Logan, Ellie, Hunter, and Nora. No one else. When I returned to the house, chaos had taken over. Ellie threw her arms around me, whispering, "Is Mom okay?" I hugged her close, assuring her that Dr. Patel was taking good care of Cheryl. Hunter kept asking where Blake was and why he never came home, while Nora refused to fall asleep unless I stayed in the room. Logan tried to look composed, but the tight fists at his sides told another story. The house itself looked as if a storm had torn through. Dishes stacked high in the sink, laundry spilling across the floor, half-finished homework scattered on the table. Blake was nowhere in sight. His extra shifts at the supermarket had suddenly doubled, and when I finally did see him, he barely grunted a hello before grabbing a beer and vanishing into the garage. "He's been like this since Mom got sick," Logan muttered one evening, resentment edging his voice. I took over again, but differently this time. I wasn't falling back into servitude. I was teaching them structure. I had Logan handle the laundry, Ellie take care of dishes, and gave Hunter and Nora simpler chores like making their beds and putting toys away. "You're the team now," I told them. "You've got to look out for each other." I stuck to my terms. I came by after my cafe shifts to cook dinner, help with homework, and check in, but I never stayed overnight. My space was sacred now. One night, as I gathered my things, Ellie looked up from the couch. "Why can't you stay?" she asked quietly. I knelt beside her. "Because I need my own place, sweetheart, but that doesn't mean I'm not here for you." She nodded, though her eyes brimmed with sadness. Blake's distance only made things worse. He'd roll in late, mutter something about work, and disappear before the kids could ask questions. One night, I found Nora crying in her bed because he'd missed her school play. "He promised he'd come," she sobbed into my shoulder. I held her as she wept, my anger at Blake burning low and steady. Logan overheard us and shook his head. "He's checked out," he said flatly. "Always has been." I didn't argue. He was right. The family was hanging by a thread, and I couldn't stitch it back together completely. My goal now was to keep the kids grounded, fed, rested, and safe. Tara called one afternoon while I was helping Hunter with his math homework. "You're slipping into old patterns again," she warned. "Don't let them drag you under." I sighed. "It's just 3 months, Tara. For the kids. I've got boundaries this time." "I hope so," she said softly. "Be careful when Cheryl's back. She'll lean on you the second she can." I knew she was right, but the thought of the kids kept me steady. I wasn't their mother, but I couldn't stand by while they fell apart. By the second month, the rhythm of my days had hardened into routine. Work, help the kids, then back to my studio. Cheryl would call occasionally, asking for updates, and I kept my answers brief. Blake's absences stretched longer and longer. Logan had started taking charge. Grocery runs, keeping an eye on Nora's nightmares, helping Ellie with homework. but the weight of it all showed in his tired eyes. One night, he broke the silence. "I'm scared for Mom," he said quietly, "but I'm mad too. She's never really here," Logan said quietly, "even when she's not sick." I nodded, my chest tight with sympathy. I couldn't stay in that house forever, but for now, I'd keep things steady for their sake. Driving home that night, I thought about my sketchbook waiting on my desk, the one place where my life still felt like mine. I was helping, yes, but I'd promised myself I wouldn't disappear into Cheryl's chaos again. 3 months later, Cheryl came home from the hospital with her newborn in her arms. I'd fulfilled my word, caring for the kids through her bed rest, but my part in this story was over. When I met her at the house, she was in the kitchen, cradling the baby while Blake hovered in the background. I stood tall. "I'm done, Cheryl," I said evenly. "I love the kids, but I can't keep doing this." Her eyes hardened. "You're abandoning us again?" she snapped. I shook my head slowly. "No, I've done more than enough. You're their mother. It's your turn to step up." She turned away without replying, and I knew that was the end. I walked out the door, closing that chapter of my life for good. Still, I couldn't just vanish from the kids' world. Logan, Ellie, Hunter, and Nora deserved better than being left to weather their parents' chaos alone. I called Tara, who lived nearby, and asked if she could be their go-to person. "Be their lifeline," I said. She agreed without hesitation. Each month, I sent her $50 from my cafe paycheck, money for school supplies or snacks. Tara set up regular video calls, and I'd check in twice a week. Logan and I went over algebra problems together. Ellie showed me her essay drafts. Hunter proudly displayed his latest science experiments, and Nora would chatter endlessly about her newest crayon drawings. It wasn't the same as being there, but it kept us close, without dragging me back into Cheryl's orbit. Over time, bits of news trickled in through Tara. Cheryl had lost her call center job after too many absences during recovery. Blake packed up one night and disappeared without explanation. Logan told Tara their neighbors had stopped visiting, worn down by Cheryl's drama and excuses. The kids were struggling, but I couldn't fix their parents anymore. All I could do was stay steady, send what little help I could, check in, and remind Logan he was stronger than he knew. Hearing Ellie's voice crack over the phone broke me a little every time, but I knew distance was the only way to protect myself and still be there for them. Meanwhile, I poured everything into my work. I'd kept up my online design courses, and one of my classmates connected me with a local business that needed a logo. That first project led to another, then a cafe website redesign. By month's end, I had 3 steady clients, enough income to leave the coffee shop behind. My tiny studio transformed into a real workspace, walls lined with sketches, color palettes, and pinned mock-ups. For the first time, it felt like I was building something that couldn't be taken away. When a client paid me $500 for a full branding package, I nearly cried. It was more than I'd ever earned in a single week at the cafe. Tara still updated me about the kids, but her tone turned cautious. "Cheryl's spiraling," she said one evening. "Be careful, she's looking for someone to blame again." "She's been asking about you," Tara said during one of our calls. "Says you owe her for everything she's done." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "She can't guilt me anymore," I said. I'd already learned my lesson after her fake police report. I asked Tara to keep my number private. No direct calls, no messages except from the kids. A few days later, Logan texted saying Cheryl was behind on bills. I sent Tara an extra $20 for groceries, but I didn't contact Cheryl. She'd made her choices, and I wasn't her safety net anymore. My focus was on the kids, always had been, always would be. For Ellie's birthday, I mailed her a sketchbook with a note that said, "Keep drawing, it's your superpower." She sent back a drawing of the 2 of us labeled Best Aunt. Hunter called beaming, proud of his science fair win, and I clapped and cheered through the video screen. Nora still asked for bedtime stories over the phone, her giggles filling my tiny studio when I made up ridiculous endings. Logan, though, stayed quiet, older than his years, weighed down by things he shouldn't have to carry. One evening he texted, "Mom's not even trying anymore." I told him to stay focused on school, to hold on to his goals, and promised I'd always be in his corner, just not under Cheryl's roof. Meanwhile, my freelance career finally took off. A Madison startup hired me to design their full marketing campaign, logos, branding, everything. It meant long nights, endless revisions, and coffee-fueled mornings, but the paycheck covered my bills and left something to save. I wasn't wealthy, but I was independent, and that meant more than anything. Cheryl's life was collapsing around her, and though part of me ached for what the kids were enduring, I knew I couldn't carry her anymore. They had Tara to lean on, and they had me in the way that truly mattered. One night, as I sat in the soft glow of my laptop, my newest design complete on the screen, pride washed over me. I'd built this life from the ground up. No debts, no guilt, no apologies. For the first time in years, everything I had was mine, and no one could ever take it away.